All right, long-awaited Cervélo S5 2023 long-term review. I mentioned it in the Madone review, and now we're going to take a look a little bit more closely at the Cervélo, and then might do a second video on kind of how those two different bikes compare and the pros and cons of each one. But we'll keep this one focused on the Cervélo for now. I am riding a 58, and with the current 353 wheels I have on it, weighs around 7.4 kilograms, including pedals. So not too heavy, set up a little bit more for the mountains. We have a mountain race coming up, so got to keep the weight down, otherwise use the NV 4.5s in the bike. And what do the people want to know? That's the real question.
People want to know, how's it handle?
Handling, kind of hard to describe, but very, very good.
Okay.
It's not twitchy at all. Like, it's probably the least twitchy bike I've ever ridden.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever gotten like a hint of speed wobble, even in like strong side winds.
Okay.
Regardless of which type of wheel I use, but the handling is still very direct. Like, it'll still go around the corner exactly how you want it to go. It doesn't feel like slow on the handling, so it's kind of an odd combination, but it works really, really well.
So you rode a Dogma earlier this year, or I guess that was last year at this point, but how does it compare in handling to that?
To the Dogma, better.
Better, like
better
sharper?
In the sense that, yeah, it was a little bit sharper. So the Dogma, you had to lean over pretty hard to get it to go around the corner. You have to be comfortable with, like leaning the bike, which some people are not for the Dogma. For this one, it's not like that so much. Like, you can just turn and it'll go. Obviously, leaning is still the better technique, and it will respond to that as well. But I would say handling better on the S5 than the Dogma.
Okay.
Acceleration, also
stiffness too.
A little bit better on the S5 than the Dogma. The Dogma felt very muted, and so did the Madone, for that matter. This bike feels a little bit more snappy, but not as snappy as something like a light climbing bike either. Like, it's definitely an aero bike. So stiffness is high. It's a very stiff bike. Probably one of the stiffest you could buy right now.
Too stiff?
That was my worry. That was my worry, especially because the previous version was known for being too stiff and a little bit hollow feeling. They've done a lot of work, even though the exterior is not drastically changed. The ride feel is definitely improved. I was really worried about it beating me up on long rides, but it actually, despite being very stiff, one, the 28 tires help, but two, the ride is actually fairly smooth, but it's not as smooth as an endurance bike. It's not as smooth as the Madone, and it's probably not as smooth as the Dogma either.
Okay.
But that said, with the tubeless tires and a comfortable seat, I've not had any issues with long-term comfort. Like, I've done plenty of 7-8 hour rides and it's fine. Like, I'm not getting off the bike like, wow, I can't walk at all anymore.
Sweet.
Okay, so the camera died on us while we were out doing the ride portion of the review, so I'm just going to finish up right here with this still of the bike and go over some of the parts and pick up right where we left off with the kind of comfort element of the bike. So if you remember the Madone review that I did, and if you haven't seen it, just click on the link or the playlist. It's not as comfortable as the Madone, but on the opposite side of that, the handlebars on the Madone are a little bit too flexy. For my liking, the handlebars on this S5 are very stiff, and I find that very reassuring when you're sprinting, so I like that a lot. But what I don't love is the bars have zero flare, so they're not super comfortable in the drops. They're okay, but I find that my wrist will just start to hit here just a tiny bit because of the way that the curve kind of forces your hand to be like this. You get a little bit of like a kink in the wrist, or if you have it straight, you kind of bump your wrist just a little bit. So I don't love the shape of the bars, but I do love the stiffness, and Otherwise, the feel of the bar is great. The tops are actually super comfortable when you're riding, and I find myself climbing. I kind of use this as another handhold, just holding like this right here on the tops. So that's pretty comfortable. Let's talk about this. So this is the Garmin mount that comes with the bars. Terrible. It doesn't hold its position very well, so I've tightened it down way past spec, and it's held okay, but it just gets a little bit rattly. Even the puck right here gets a little bit rattly, so I'm looking to replace that pretty soon. Now let's talk about the aerodynamics. Obviously, the bike is super aerodynamic, very thin, all the way down, even down to the bottle cages. So this is where, how much aerodynamic benefit are you getting from the shape versus how much drag are you incurring? So, as that water bottle's hanging over the edge of this aerodynamic shape, is that aerodynamic shape really beneficial? Obviously, it tests pretty fast in the wind tunnel, and they do test that with at least one bottle. So the shape must work well. I just wonder, could it work better, or is it actually, does it actually work all right? Obviously, they've brought the bottom bracket up here, so this junction has risen much higher. Always have a chain catcher on my bike, and hello, Nisha. Okay, please move. And I've currently got it built up with Ultegra group set, but I'll do crank with the power to max. So love that combination, nice and stiff. Haven't had any issues with creaking on the bike or anything. I did initially have a little bit of an issue, but it turns out it was just the rear through axle, and I cleaned it off, tightened it up, and no issues with creaking. Otherwise, seat post is held in place just fine. I do have a direct mount hanger on it and a ceramic speed. Stay tuned for a ceramic speed review. Spoiler alert, don't love it, and we'll go into that in another video. But otherwise, the whole bike definitely very aerodynamic shape, and honestly, it's been fantastic. I'll say the adjustability on the clamp, not great. Like, it's such a wide stance that it really doesn't give you any room to move that seat forward or backwards. So make sure you order or buy separately the correct sized offset seat post for your bike, because you will not have a lot of forward to back adjustment on your saddle. So going back to kind of a comparison to the Madone and to the Dogma, I'd say of the three, the Cervélo has been my favorite. And especially with these lighter climbing wheels when I'm doing the mountains, you do feel that it's a different bike from a climbing bike. And I mentioned that earlier when we were outside riding. You do feel that it's a different bike. It doesn't have the same snap that a climbing bike has, but with these lighter wheels on it, I'd say the acceleration is still very good. And I've been able to set a few PRs uphill, even though the bike is a little bit heavier than my climbing bike. Now, I haven't been able to do any controlled tests, so take that for a grain of salt. I will say I'm going to try to get some parts to rebuild the Addict, and then do some more head-to-head comparisons versus like full aero versus climbing bike. And then I do also have a Cannondale, one of the new Super 6 Evos that I'm testing. So we'll see kind of how the in-between bike works. But this is a Cervélo S5, and it's been a really awesome bike. I've loved it so far. Let me know what questions you have about the Cervélo, and I can do a follow-up video. Anything you want to know, happy to go into it. But so far, would recommend this bike. I would even probably recommend this bike over the Madone, with the exception being the geometry has to fit you. This is definitely a longer and lower bike than the Madone. The Madone accommodates a few more positions, same as the Dogma, right? The Dogma has a lot of geometry that you can get a good fit for yourself. This one I had to shorten the stem just by 10 millimeters to get the fit I needed. And I always like the inline seat posts. That's just a preference of mine. Your mileage may vary. But so far, this has been my favorite of the three, and definitely very quick in a straight line. Very fast. Can't complain there. Is it faster than my other bike? I don't know. We're going to have to do some more rigorous testing, but the data would seem to suggest that yes, it is a little bit faster. With that, guys, let me know what type of testing or comparisons you'd like to see to just a climbing bike. And I also actually have an old cyclocross, just round aluminum tube bike that I could even compare as well. So we could maybe get like a comparison between all three. So just a standard round tube aluminum bike, a lightweight climbing bike, and then the Cervélo S5. And we can see, you know, is there any measurable difference between the setups? Obviously it's all fit for me, so handlebar height is all pretty similar, and I can put the same set of wheels on each bike. So maybe that's worth doing. Let me know in the comments, and let me know what other questions you have about the Cervélo. Thanks for watching.